Right, thank you. You're in great hands. Let not your heart be troubled. Congressman, take it away.
Thank you, Sean. Good evening and welcome to the Ingraham Angle here in New York City. I'm Jason Chaffetz, filling in for Laura Ingraham, who's on vacation. The news cycle never stops, and tonight is clearly no exception. The left's latest immigration meltdown, the possibility of arming teachers in the classroom, a monster hurricane headed to Hawaii, and a Capitol Hill corruption. Plus, a new bombshell story on James Comey's botched investigation of Hillary Clinton. The report's author will be here, and you don't want to miss this. You won't believe what he has to say. But first, another wild day between President Trump and the Department of Justice. It got started with President Trump's comments on Attorney General Jeff Sessions on Fox and Friends.
The Dems are very strong in the Justice Department. I put an Attorney General that never took control of the Justice Department, Jeff Sessions, never took control of the Justice Department, and it's a sort of an incredible thing.
Jeff Sessions quickly fired back in a statement that said, "I took control of the Department of Justice the day I was sworn in, which is why we have had unprecedented success at effectuating the president's agenda. While I am Attorney General, the actions of the Department of Justice will not be improperly influenced by political considerations. I demand the highest standards, and where they are not met, I take action." Pretty bold from the Attorney General, but in my opinion, not necessarily accurate. In another development, Fox News today confirmed that Department of Justice prosecutors in Manhattan have granted immunity to David Pecker. He's the CEO of the company that publishes the National Enquirer. He reportedly has insider knowledge of the payments that went to Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels in exchange for their silence about alleged affairs with President Trump. And breaking just moments ago, the New York Times has a report that says the Manhattan district attorney is considering charges against the Trump Organization and two senior company officials related to the payments to Stormy Daniels. That's important because President Trump has no power to pardon individuals convicted of state crimes. Joining me now to make sense of all this, Chris Hahn, radio talk show host and former aide to Senator Chuck Schumer, Matt Schlapp, chairman of the American Conservative Union, and David Bossie, former deputy chairman of the Trump campaign. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. David, I want to start with you because the Attorney General went out of his way to say he was never influenced by any political consideration. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the first things he did is made the political consideration to recuse himself on a case that he really didn't need to do it because of political considerations, correct?
That's exactly right, Jason. And that bad decision by the Attorney General to recuse himself has borne out this incredible witch hunt that the president has had to live through over this last 18 months. Incredibly unfair to the American people. Look, this investigation has been going on almost 2 years, cost the American taxpayer over $25 million. We were investigating Russian collusion, and now we're down to the National Enquirer. I think this is an unbelievable turn of events. And look, the Attorney General is a good man. However, the president is frustrated by the Attorney General's decision. And you look at who still works there. Bruce Orr. Bruce Orr is the number 4 person at the Department of Justice, and he was helping his wife do opposition research on President Trump during the 2016 campaign. So that's why this president is frustrated. He feels that, and he sees the double standard between the Department of Justice and the Clintons and his Department of Justice.
So, Chris, are you suddenly a fan of Attorney General Sessions? Are you in his corner rooting him on now at this point?
Well, you know, prior to this, I have never agreed with Jefferson Sessions once. I've disagreed with him on about 75 different fronts. But when all is said and all is done, Jefferson Sessions has beliefs. Donald Trump has none. So on this issue, I am with him, and he should steadfastly be true to the office he's taken right now.
Do you really think that he? Do you really think it
of political influence?
But do you really believe that he had to recuse himself? This was a counterintelligence operation. There's nothing that he had to recuse himself from. It was not a criminal investigation.
He most certainly did, because you recuse yourself when there is an appearance of a conflict. He had absolutely an appearance of a conflict. He did the right thing.
Why doesn't Rod Rosenstein recuse himself, and why doesn't James Comey come forward with all the conflicts of interest? If that's the standard, then tell. Rod Rosenstein's name is on that FISA report, the subject of an investigation.
Because the president is Look, the president's making it up, and if we had a Congress that was half as interested as you were when you were chair of the House Oversight Committee on who wrote the talking points, who were interested in the felonies that might have happened in New York,
Chris,
not to mention what the Trump Organization and the Trump Foundation has done, we would have investigations going in Congress. Congress is hapless right now, Jason. When you were chair of that committee, you investigated. I think you'd be investigating right now unless you were just...
You know why? You know why Congress is hapless? Because this Attorney General does nothing to provide the documents that Congress has issued subpoena to. Matt, come on in here and give us your perspective on this, because this Attorney General is there a name only. I think he's one of the most feckless, ineffective Attorney Generals this country has ever had. But what's your read on it?
And that's my word.
Jason, I understand where you're coming from. I'm a big fan of Jeff Sessions, but I feel like for the last year and a half, it's been one of the most painful things to watch. And the saddest thing at all is, the president has amazing fortitude in pushing through his agenda. But there was two decisions that Jeff Sessions made that have really caused all this drama over the course of the last year and a half. One, picking Rod Rosenstein, someone who doesn't believe in the president and doesn't believe in his agenda, as the number 2 man at Justice. That is a big mistake. Personnel is policy, and that was a disaster. Number 2, if he was going to recuse himself,
not the president.
If he was going to he's there for all of us. If he was going to recuse himself from this investigation, then turning it over to someone like Rod Rosenstein, you would have immediately known that was going to be a mistake, because Rod Rosenstein, by his own voice, says, look, I'm not really very partisan. I just want to kind of help you run the agency. So those two decisions are why Jeff Sessions in the position he's in. And Jason, it's not fixable. There's nothing that can be done to fix the situation. We need someone running DOJ who can handle this situation and also have the confidence of the president.
David, 2 quick questions. Do you believe that Rod Rosenstein needs to recuse himself because his name is on that FISA document, which is the subject of the investigation? And number 2, do you believe that there should be a second special counsel?
I believe there needs to be another investigation into what happened within the Department of Justice and the FBI. Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, all of what happened under James Comey's watch. How this investigation was dealt with differently than Hillary Clinton's investigation, the double standard and the political nature within the FBI. You can say that all you want, Chris, but those are the facts, and that's what the American people believe.
Come on, David.
They believe that the mainstream media is biased against this president because they are. Just yesterday, 225 times
they're not.
MSNBC and CNN talk about impeachment. It is outrageous. It is outrageous on its face where we have gone as a country.
Obstruction of justice and committing felonies are things that the Congress should be looking into right now.
Yeah, there's no facts to even
what is it? Do you think that? What do you think?
There's no facts except for somebody swearing to it in court.
No.
Gentlemen, time out. One at a time. Chris, what is it? I assume you're on the bandwagon that says we should impeach Donald Trump? Yes? No?
No. Okay. I believe in justice.
All right. So you don't think
truth? Hold on a minute. I believe in getting to the. Believe in getting to the truth. And if we get to a truth that says the president committed a felony, then we can talk about impeachment. Until that time, we can't. I also say this, Jason. You can't just have a partisan impeachment. It has to be a bipartisan thing. Republicans and Democrats have to agree that the president needs to be removed.
Jason, if I could,
you get to that point,
it's Matt's turn. If I could get it, I want to remind everybody.
Chris, take a breath. Go ahead, Matt.
It's going to be okay, Chris. I want to remind everybody how this all got started. It all got started, even if you want to give the officials at DOJ a little bit of credit, and if you're a Trump fan, you want to give them just a little bit of credit. It was all about finding as fast as we could whether or not there was collusion with Putin's government. We're talking about the lifestyles of the rich and famous, and we're talking about squashing bad stories that could harm a reputation. It has nothing to do with collusion. It has nothing to do with Russia. The American people are repulsed by all of this.
David, do you get concerned?
Prosecutors need to follow the evidence where it takes them.
Gentlemen, David, are you concerned that immunity is given to a member of the media? Now, people will scoff at the National Enquirer and say, oh, it's the National Enquirer, but you don't hear very often that the Department of Justice grants immunity to a news organization. I mean, there are certain times when you go and talk to your attorney, you get attorney-client privilege. When you talk to your doctor, you expect that those medical records won't be. And when you provide information or talk to a member of the media off the record, there is some sanctity there, is there not?
There absolutely should be, and we don't know. It's all a hypothetical what David Pecker may or may not know and why he got that immunity deal. However, usually law enforcement gets something in return for that immunity deal. But if you look at Cheryl Mills and Samuelson, Hillary Clinton's lawyers, okay, you remember this very well, that they got immunity in their deals and gave nothing in return, and there were no charges.
Five got immunity, the closest to Hillary Clinton, and they got nothing out of it. Chris, you get the last word before we wrap it up.
Well, I think we all want to know what's in David Pecker's safe, because that could be very interesting to the American people, and I wish
it's
that
like
Congress
Geraldo.
was half as aggressive in figuring this out as you were when you were there.
Yeah, that's
maybe it is. Who knows?
Gentlemen, thank you. I appreciated the spirited debate. I appreciate being here. But Chris, I want you to stick around, like I want everybody else on this broadcast to stick around, because this will shock you. A bombshell report put out by Real Clear Investigations that says, despite what James Comey said, the FBI failed to look at the vast majority of the emails on Anthony Weiner's laptop, which had thousands of Hillary Clinton's State Department emails on it. Joining me now to explain further is the author of that report, investigative journalist for RealClearInvestigations.com, Paul Sperry. Paul, thanks for being here. I'm fascinated with this, because actually the letter that went to Congress explaining this was a letter that came to me when I was the chairman of the Oversight Committee. So tell me what you found out now about the reality.
That's right. So James Comey told Congress that they had reviewed all of the Clinton emails, hundreds of thousands that were found on the Weiner laptop, but that was not true. They barely looked at any of them. Just 3,000 out of 700,000 were actually individually examined.
Wait. They looked at how many?
3,000 out of potentially relevant 700,000 emails were actually individually examined for classified information and incriminating evidence.
Well, I mean, it did shock us, right? It was days. They told us they're looking into this, and then days later, they somehow reviewed 700,000 documents. How many people actually do you have any idea how many people were actually working on this case and looking at these documents?
I was just going to mention that Peter Strzok, the disgraced agent who was in charge of this mid-year investigation of the Clinton emails, he actually personally handpicked that 3,000 sample, and with two other investigators, they went through them all supposedly and pulled an all-nighter, ordered pizza, and said nothing new here, case closed once again.
So I got to tell you, as a former chairman of the committee, as the former member of Congress, I mean, how can that be anything other than the director of the FBI lying to Congress and misleading us?
Well, he also swore under oath that he had this story that there was this miraculous breakthrough in technology that allowed the FBI to process the Weiner laptop for evidence rapidly. And turns out that doesn't pass the smell test. That didn't check out either. It turns out there was a technical glitch that thwarted that effort. And I was going to mention that, Jason, that when you were on oversight, you were probably wondering the same thing. How in the world could they get through this mountain of evidence in just days after Comey gave you the final all clear on Hillary?
So now that you've unveiled or figured out what's going on with this information, where does this case go next? Is anybody investigating this? You have Michael Horowitz, who is the Inspector General for the Department of Justice. I wonder if he's looking at it. And if you have Attorney General Sessions just today said that he's only operates, without any political influence. Is the Attorney General himself looking at this in lying to Congress?
Well, this evidence that is really, it's been covered up on this laptop, this Weiner laptop, it's still relevant in the Clinton Foundation probe especially, which is still ongoing. And, the whole thing raises more suspicion that the FBI politicized these investigations during the election. And it just begs for an outside independent prosecutor to go back through this evidence, through these emails, and see if the FBI was trying to cover up material evidence in this case.
I really appreciate your good investigative work there. We were always scratching our heads in Congress. The fact that you've unveiled this, it does demand, I think, the Inspector General, the Attorney General himself, and potentially, I would advocate a second special prosecutor to look at this. There was no possible way that was happening. It creates more legal jeopardy, I think, for James Comey, and it really is a shocking revelation that not only did they use Peter Strzok to look at that information with his hand-picked people, and they, order late-night pizza. But come on, the disgraced Peter Strzok at this point, that makes absolutely no sense. Paul, I thank you for your good work and coming on this program to share this with us.
My pleasure.
Thank you. The attorney for the illegal immigrant alleged to have murdered Molly Tibbetts speaks out. You won't believe what he had to say. We'll play the tape next. Christian Rivera stands charged for the murder of 20-year-old Iowa University student Molly Tibbetts. Rivera's attorney sat down for an interview with Fox's Martha McCallum tonight, where he didn't seem to care that his client is an illegal immigrant.
The United States Constitution provides if you're not a citizen, you still are entitled to the jurisdictions of the courts and entitled to equal protection under the law.
I don't think anyone said he wasn't. What people are saying is that he arrived here illegally from Mexico 4 to 7 years ago.
That's your rhetoric on it.
It's not rhetoric. That's what the immigration officials are saying their reports indicate. He used a false name to work for an employer. They thought he was somebody else. We know that as well. These are the facts that are being dug up in the case.
Martha's exactly right. Joining me now with reactions are Tom Homan, a Fox News contributor, and the former acting director of ICE, and immigration attorney Alan Orr. Alan, is it a legitimate question or subject for us to discuss if somebody's here legally or illegally?
I think it is if we're dealing with the matter of immigration, if we're in immigration court or an immigration proceeding. But I think what the family has said in this situation, and also what the law sort of bears out in the way this case is being handled, that the fact that this person is undocumented is not an essential part of this actual criminal activity. So therefore,
But Alan, don't you believe if he was unable to get here, if he had come legally and lawfully, he may not have ever come here. The fact that he was here and is illegal, Molly would be alive if he weren't in this country. Do you believe that or not believe that?
First of all, this is an absolute tragedy, and I offer my condolences to the family.
Yeah.
And the possibility of changing what actually happened, no one can do those circumstances, so I'm not going to play that game, what if.
It's not a game. It's not a game. When people are here illegally and they commit a crime, I really do believe that crime wouldn't have been committed because they wouldn't have been here. Is that logical?
I'm a philosophy major. No, it's not a logical answer.
It's not a philosophy. It's logic.
It's not a logical answer. No, there are endless possibilities of things that could have happened. So no, that is not a logical answer to say that if this person wasn't here.
And he would have been in Mexico, right?
We're saying in this specific occurrence.
Yes, in this specific case where a young woman going to college, about to enter her junior year, is murdered. You're telling me that's not relevant?
I'm uncertain if you're asking me if the immigration status is relevant. It is not relevant.
Yes, it is because he wouldn't have been in this country.
What is relevant is the individual and those individual actions which have been discussed clearly in the criminal case.
His actions of coming here illegally ultimately led to her being killed by this person. That's the allegation. We'll see if it's true, but that's the allegation. Tom,
well, that's a fallacy of causation. That's a fallacy of causation because he was here for 4 years with no problem. He worked at a farm.
We don't know that yet. We don't know that yet. Hold on. I want to bring in Tom. Tom spent a lifetime in law enforcement protecting us and getting rid of some of the most nefarious criminals that are out there. Tom, what's your take on this?
I think my friend Alan's way wrong on this, and you're right. Look, fact. He was in the country illegally. Fact, if he wasn't here, this girl would be alive today. That's just a fact of the case. It's not a philosophy. It's a fact. This girl is dead today because he killed her and he was here illegally. If he wouldn't have been here, if we had a border wall, if we had real border enforcement, maybe he wouldn't have been here. So it's stone cold fact.
Let me play a little clip here of a candidate for the United States Senate, the person who's running against Ted Cruz. Oh, sorry, it's not. Okay, we don't have this clip. But you have a lot of people that are saying, hey, we should decriminalize this. You know, essentially open borders. We want to abolish ICE. Alan, where do you stand on those two issues?
Right. So first, the abolish ICE movement as well as the decriminalization of immigration are totally separate issues. And I want to be very clear.
They're separate, but go ahead.
Very clear earlier, saying that his immigration status had nothing to do with the crime and what happened in that occurrence. So what is not important, or what is super important in the story.
Alan, I'm not going to let you get away with that. I'm going to keep arguing. Because if he didn't come here illegally, then he wouldn't have committed this crime. And you think that's a philosophy? I think that's just the fact.
No, I'm saying it's a fallacy of causation. You're sort of saying because he was illegal, he committed the crime, which is not the case.
If somebody, Alan, if somebody breaks into your home and then murders you, what do you think would happen if he didn't break into your home?
Right. So these kind of arguments, these equivocations, these straw man arguments aren't useful to the conversation.
It's not a straw man. We have a dead woman.
And it is a tragedy for the family, and they've asked that her death not be political issues based on this, because they
it's the number one issue facing voters according to poll. Tom,
that
jump in
here. An individual's actions does not represent the whole community of immigrants in this country. So therefore,
I didn't say
really
that. But look, I'm not going to let you get away with that either. There's a difference between immigrants and illegal immigrants. Tom, explain the difference.
Look, immigrants are people here illegally. Illegal alien, which is the term in the law books, illegal aliens are here illegally. Look, bottom line is the comment that Alan just made that his family didn't want this politicized. Look, illegal immigration has been a political issue for decades. It's emotional. But look, fact, about 2 hours ago, I got a text, actually email from Don Rosenberg, an angel dad from California, who talked about this case and talked about LA editorial where they talked about politicizing these deaths. Don Rosenberg reminded me, he goes, Tom, every one of us Angel families, we want the president to speak about this. We've been speaking about this for a long time, but we never had a voice until President Trump got to be president. He created the Voice Office, Victims of Immigration Crime at ICE. So here's an angel dad reached out to me today, which is a coincidence. We're having this interview tonight, saying we want a voice. We want the American people to understand the tragedy. We have children that have been killed by illegal aliens. We need to talk about it.
So, Alan, let me talk about some video.
That people,
Alan, I got to show you some video.
Okay.
There are those of us that believe in the wall and believe you should lock down the border. And down on the southern border, there's this video, which hopefully will come up on the screen as we're speaking, of what was going on at a KFC. There was a tunnel that was going into this KFC, which was providing this conduit. This is the KFC. This kind of reminds me of Breaking Bad and how they were moving drugs through. But this is the tunnel that's moving through. So do you advocate for open borders, or do you think that we need more resources, more funds, and more resources to lock down that border, particularly on our southern border? Alan?
I don't think anyone is sort of arguing for open borders. And the point that you're bringing about right now, I'm glad that we're talking about the stories, because that's exactly the issue. That ICE really should be focused on these type of issues rather than separating families and children at the border, rather than showing up at courthouses. They should be focused on trying to look for these major crimes.
Border Patrol separated families, not ICE, and I support the Border Patrol doing that, because if it would have stayed with that, the numbers were already down by 20% just the several weeks they did it. It should have stuck with for another 30 days, and this problem would have been solved. But decriminalizing illegal immigration is going to result in more illegal immigrants coming to this country. That's just a fact.
Gentlemen, thank you. And the reality is, if you put up a wall, you're not going to separate families, because they're not going to get in this country in the first place. Well, thank you, and I appreciate you gentlemen being here. I really do appreciate it. More left-wing outrage tonight, this time over a report that the Trump administration is considering using federal funds to help arm teachers in the classroom. We'll debate it next. According to the New York Times, Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos is considering a plan that would provide federal funding to help arm teachers. Predictably, the left reacted with outrage.
Teachers don't want guns. They know it makes them a target if, God forbid, a shooter comes into the school. And now, DeVos wants to take federal funds away from instruction so that the school district can buy guns for teachers? What is that all about?
Senator Schumer knows not what he says, and nor is he giving a proper representation of what the secretary is trying to do. But joining me now for a debate is Guns Down Executive Director Igor Volsky and Laura Carno, founder of Faster Colorado. I thank you both for being here. Igor, I get the idea that you advocate and don't want any guns in any schools. And I wish the bad guys wouldn't bring guns into schools or really anywhere.
Well, look, we're on the same page. I think we should have a country with fewer guns, a country where guns are significantly
that's where we're on a different page. That's where we're on a different page.
A safer country. Look at us. Same page, Jason.
No, I think your utopia that you describe is just fiction, and it's not reality. So let's pretend that somebody does bring a gun into the school. Then what do you advocate?
Well, I mean, if somebody brings a gun into a school, that situation should be dealt with. But what we know is that when...
But how? But how?
Well, I mean, it depends on what happens. If somebody reports the student, he's going to be dealt that way. If he starts some kind of incident, certainly police are going to be called. But in terms of arming teachers, right, which is the question here, what we've seen time and time and time again is that individuals who are carrying firearms do not respond well in an active shooting situation. The adrenaline that runs through your body in those moments, without the proper training that professionals have in this field, you're not going to be able to handle this well, and oftentimes innocent people get hurt. So this correlation between
do you think more innocent people get hurt if there's nobody on? Wait, hold on, Igor. Is there more people getting potentially hurt if there's no resistance, or is there if there is somebody who's there to protect maybe themselves and their kids?
You know, the FBI actually looked at this very question. They looked from 2000 to 2013 at active shooting situations, and they actually found that unarmed individuals were far more successful at disarming the intruder
if I got a guy with a gun in my school, I want to have a gun with me too. So Laura, let's get your perspective, because Faster Colorado, you've dedicated part of your career here in your efforts to actually help engage teachers. How would you see this working?
Yeah, and it's working today. We've got hundreds of armed school staff already in Colorado and thousands across the country. And what it comes down to is these are our school staff, teachers, janitors, whoever. They would die to protect their kids. And in all of these school shootings you see, they're dying to protect kids. They can protect kids and live and be able to save kids and go back to their own families. And you know, we hear a lot of these statistics. They're not completely accurate. What we do know is that when somebody is there on scene to stop the killer as close as possible to where he starts his crime, fewer people are hurt or die. Yeah. The alternative is you have to wait for law enforcement. And if it's even 3 minutes, most of these things are over in 3 to 5 minutes. That's a lot of people dying with nobody there to stop a shooter.
And Igor, this is where I think you're wrong, because it will take law enforcement even just a few minutes, and the carnage that can ensue is just so wrong. When I went to school up in Middle Park in Granby, Colorado, a small school, I had Coach Schmidt. Guess what? Coach Schmidt knew more about guns than probably anybody I've ever met and know. And him wielding a gun or having a little sidearm, I think would have made us a lot safer. Guns aren't for everybody. You got to have an aptitude and a desire, but nobody's suggesting that every teacher do this. What's wrong with Coach Schmidt having a gun in the school?
Well, listen, if that coach has the right amount of training, maybe we can think about it. But look, I think we can all agree that guns are too easy to get in this country, that we should work on making sure that gun never gets into the school. We got to make guns harder to get, because all the data shows us that fewer guns means safer communities. And you talk about a utopia. You know, all other high-income countries have far less gun violence.
I don't buy that. Look what's going on in Chicago. Chicago is some of the toughest gun laws out there.
I'm happy to talk about Chicago, but you're the one who brought up a utopia, this idea where you can live in a gun violence-free world. And I'm telling you, nations around the world are living that utopia, and they're living it because they have fewer guns, because guns there are harder to get.
Laura, how do we best protect our kids? What's the right thing? What is the right policy for schools?
Yeah, we protect our kids the way we protect our families. And people can make decisions to have a school that doesn't have armed staff and does have armed staff, and parents can choose. But for my kids, for my grandkids, I want somebody there who can stop whatever happens, whether it's a fire, whatever other danger, including active killers. And what we know about active killers, Jason, is that the next one's out there. He's already planning his crime. No amount of gun control is going to stop him. So what are we going to do when he comes to the door of the school, gets into the school like we keep seeing? Somebody has to be there to stop him, or we're going to see more kids die and more school staff die. And you're right. We've got janitors who are all over the school, coaches, they're all over the school. There are lots of folks. And in my training program, we see them. They're all volunteers. They raise their hand and they say, pick me to save kids. That's what we should be looking at across the country.
We got a lot of former military people. We got a lot of former policemen that should be involved and engaged. I think the right answer is not for everyone, but those that are trained and those with an aptitude, I think, should be in those schools, and it'll make those schools safer. I thank you both for your passion on this issue and coming on the air to discuss it tonight. Some troubling new data about welfare use in this country. Plus, Hurricane Lane is barreling into Hawaii, one of my favorite places on the planet. We have new developments on its track. It's coming up next. Trouble in paradise. Hurricane Lane is steadily making its way to Hawaii. Fox News chief meteorologist Rick Reichmuth is here with the new details. Rick?
Jason, yeah, so take a look at the radar picture here, and you get the idea. We've got rain falling heavy on the Big Island. In fact, we've had about 18 inches in some spots on the eastern side of the island. Incredible flooding going on already, and a lot more rain to go. But Maui, Oahu, over towards Kauai, everybody already getting in on some of it. And here on the radar, you can see that. That's the center of the storm. Center of the storm likely won't cross landfall. I say likely, we can't fully rule it out just yet. But because of just the trajectory this storm has taken, it's going to be impacting Hawaii for a long time. Came to the south of it, made this northerly turn, and it's going to make a west turn here, likely before moving across parts of the islands, at least the center of it. But that means we just have a long time. It's a long duration storm. And because of that, it's longer duration. With that rain, the rainfall totals will pile up, as will the flooding. It's down to a category 3, so the center of the storm doesn't have as strong of winds as it did before. We expected that to happen. The farther north it moves, it's going to encounter some shear and break it apart a little bit. Still, though, take a look at this. This is Friday morning, Saturday morning. We're somewhere here past around Oahu. By Sunday morning, it's likely past the island chain, but that is about 2.5 days. So 2.5 more days of the rain that we've got to deal with. These are the models that we look at. You'll notice all of them moving towards the north and all of them eventually making this westerly turn. Does that get a little bit closer here, maybe around Oahu or Maui? That's certainly a possibility, and that's why we certainly can't let our guards down by any means. That said, these are big storms, so the impact will certainly be there with all of the rain. This is that wind shear I'm talking about, and the farther north it goes, it interacts more with that. And that's why we'll eventually see a weakening storm, which is good news, but the impacts are going to be the same nonetheless. Now, you'll notice it's primarily on the eastern side of the islands. Here at Big Island, where we still are probably going to be looking at about another 18 inches of rain. Same goes up around Maui, a little bit less likely once we get towards Oahu and in towards Kauai. And as far as wind goes, take a look at this. That yellow, that is tropical storm force winds. Throughout the overnight hours tonight, we're going to be dealing with that across parts of the Big Island. Much of the day tomorrow and Saturday, they're across parts of those central islands. So a long track storm, or a long duration storm, and because of that, that's why we're so concerned about that flooding, and it's going to cause quite a bit of damage, certainly.
Thank you, Rick. And an amazing amount of rain. Good luck there in Hawaii. We're thinking about you and praying for you. Well, Democrats are flirting with socialism, and if you look at the latest census data from 2016, it's not hard to see why. A whopping 52.1% of Americans under the age of 18 lived in a household that received at least one type of welfare. It begs the big question, are we breeding a new generation of dependency on government? Joining me now for analysis are David Burstein, is the founder of Run for America, and Doug Schoen, who's a political analyst and Fox News contributor. Gentlemen, I thank you both for being here. But David, where is this taking us? Is this new generation just going to assume the government's going to be there to bail them out the rest of their lives?
Well, look, I think we have to look at these numbers, and these are not good numbers, because what they underlie is that there are some fundamental problems in our economy and the way that it's working for people. You know, I don't think the biggest problem here is the government dependency that's being created, but the reality of the economy that most young people are growing up in, which does not spell a tremendous amount of opportunity for them going forward. And so when we think about the economic policies that we're creating in the future we're building,
every story we've had over the last 6 months to a year is about record low unemployment levels. So,
well, the economy's working for a certain set of people, but for people who are just beginning,
unemployment is near 3.0% as it is, say, in Utah, then I mean, why so many people still on the dependency?
Because these are people, as you know, who are 18, who are not counted in those numbers, right? People under the age of 18 are generally not counted in unemployment numbers because they haven't reached full maturity in the labor market yet. So these are people who are beginning their career and beginning their lives at a huge disadvantage to everybody else, and frankly only have these level of policies to help them out, because we haven't created a fair economy for people.
Okay, so I want to get into that because I want to talk about the minimum wage, but let me put up this graphic here and show how the growth has happened. This is households with children under the age of 18 receiving government assistance from 1998 up to 2013, 36.9 up to 51.8%. Doug, what's your read on that?
Well, I was one of those advising the Clinton administration, and as you, I'm sure, remember, we did work requirements, time limits for welfare, and while I agree that there are people who need assistance, the disabled, Hispanic communities is now at record lows. So we're making a lot of progress, but there's obviously more to do.
David, what's your take on minimum wage? Because you got kids that are turning the corner, 15, 16 years old. And then when minimum wage goes up, what do you think happens to the employment of those young teenagers trying to get their first job and get the experience they need?
Well, look, I mean, the reality that we've got to look at here is that these people who are 18 and they're starting out, and this report, by the way,
that's not what I asked you, David. I asked you about the kids that are 15, 16 years old trying to get a first job. What do you think is the effect of a rising minimum wage? What is the cause and effect?
The children who we're looking at in this report, you know, many of these people are going out and they're getting the same kind of jobs that people have gotten
Jason,
historically.
it's very simple.
Okay, see, David, since you're not going to ask that,
yeah,
Doug, go to you.
Look, I am one who believes in work programs. I believe in incentives for job training, minority business and the like. But if you do not allow younger people to get below minimum wage jobs as a first opportunity to get in the workforce, all you do is hurt poor people. I don't want to sound draconian or tough or harsh, but that's just a statistical fact of life.
No, you're like my hero for the moment, because I think you're absolutely right. In fact, one of the good things I thought happened with Bill Clinton's years, along with Newt Gingrich, were a lot of these work requirements.
That's exactly right.
And David, I got to tell you, I really do believe when you see rising unemployment levels, guess what? They hire less young people. And when those young people don't have experience and learn the value of a dollar, guess what? Then they start in this cycle.
We want people in the workforce, period. I do it myself in my own business. I'm proud of it. And you know what?
I did it. My kids did it.
Right.
Gentlemen, I wish I had more time. David, Doug, I thank you very much.
Thanks, Jason.
I really do appreciate you coming on tonight.
Appreciate it.
A former congressman accused of spending taxpayer money to fund a lavish lifestyle says the charges are bogus. Aaron Schock is here, and he'll tell us how he's fighting back. Aaron Schock was once a rising star in the Republican Party. I served with him in Congress. Elected when he was just 27 years old, he took on an almost celebrity status, even appearing on the cover of Men's Health, something I could never do. But 6 years ago, in his time after 6 years of his time in Congress, there were allegations of misdeeds regarding the decoration of his office and the potential misuse of a campaign vehicle. According to his attorney, 30 federal agents were involved. There were 2 grand juries convened. He was charged with 24 felonies, 2 of which have been dismissed, and he faces 80 to 100 years in prison. Yet 4 years later, the prosecutor was reassigned after lying to the court. He says he has spent nearly $3 million defending himself, and yet he has still never had his day in court. It's time to hear Aaron's side of the story, and he joins me here today. Aaron, tell me, why are we at this situation 4 years after the fact that you left Congress?
Well, thank you for having me on, Jason. As you know, anytime you're involved in a legal matter, your attorneys say, hey, don't say anything, and justice will prevail. And I've always believed in our criminal justice system, that they're interested in the truth. But sadly, it became very clear that over the 2 years that they were investigating me, that they were on a massive fishing expedition. They went so far while I was still in office, the Obama Justice Department, to wire up a low-level staffer in my office. They directed that staffer without a search warrant to steal documents in my office, to steal attorney-client privilege material, and to even steal records of the House of Representatives. And then they were forced in court to admit they didn't find anything. So, of course, the natural question is,
okay, so let me put up this graphic. One of the things that catches my attention here is that the House counsel is there to protect the institution, not necessarily the members of Congress. But I want to put up on the screen what he actually has said in this. This is the House counsel talking about the FBI and the Department of Justice. Such conduct likely constitutes a federal crime on the part of the FBI, on the part of federal agents who induced the commission of that underlying crime. So he's taken the position not against Aaron Schock, but in support of Aaron Schock.
Support of me, and to your point, the support of the institution of the House of Representatives. The government has repeatedly infringed on the separation of powers of the institution of Congress, and unfortunately that letter has never been responded to by the Justice Department. They infringed upon the constitutional rights of Congress as well to make and interpret its own rules, and in the way they've charged me in these supposed felonies is almost laughable when you understand them. Let me give you two quick examples. One, I purchased a car with campaign funds, which is perfectly legal for the use driving around my district. We submitted to the FEC the purchase of that vehicle and the payment to the dealership as a transportation expense. The government now has charged me with a false statement to a federal agency. They believe it should have said vehicle purchase, and they've charged me
as opposed to transportation expense.
20-year felony.
And as I recall, they were the news article initially said, oh, you had run up, more vehicle miles than what you sold it for, but there were multiple vehicles involved, correct?
Correct. Of course, as you know, when you drive around your district, you're not always in the same vehicle at all times. And my staff and I were estimating my mileage as we went around the district, which the House Finance Office accepted as estimates. Okay, the government now comes back and says you can't have estimates.
Okay, so let's go to your office. One of the criticisms is that you use this extravagant amount of money to decorate your office. Downton Abbey was the thing that was tagged in your office. Is that... What's your viewpoint on that?
Well, first of all, it's not true. The truth of the matter is, Jason, I've never seen the show Downton Abbey. I hadn't even heard of the show Downton Abbey until the Washington Post ran that story. The next day I did an interview with CBS Evening News where I said, this is not true. The decorator who did the office gave an interview to the Huffington Post.
Where did the money come from?
The money came from my budget, my office budget. So I spent $25,000 from my office budget on my office.
So members are given what's called the members reimbursable allowance. It's roughly $1.4 million, but correct. You spent money, $25,000 or so of that office budget on your office.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but what were you charged with there?
Well, so there one of the items we purchased, for example, the decorator purchase, was a light fixture. And according to the House rules, you can buy fixtures but not furniture. And so the government has come in and said, well, that's not a fixture, that's a piece of furniture. Again, a false statement to a federal agency, 20-year felony.
So you're facing 20 years because they say that you put it on your form saying it was a fixture as opposed to a piece of furniture, even though it's a piece of lighting.
Correct.
That's really, and you're facing 20 years against that. Now, why has this taken so long? I mean, I've seen multiple different prosecutors. I believe you're now on your third judge.
Correct. So typically the Justice Department, this is my first rodeo, my first time dealing with this. Typically the Justice Department defers to local U.S. Attorney's office. They get to run their little fiefdom and they defer to their judgment. What's happened over the past 4 years is the local U.S. Attorney's office, this Obama holdover Justice Department in Central Illinois, has proven a lack of judgment, frankly. First, not only did they wire up my informant illegally and steal documents of mine.
So that didn't happen with the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C.
No, this is a local office who saw me as a rising star in the Republican Party and their ticket to stardom, their ticket to move up the ladder within the Justice Department. After they wired up my informant and didn't find anything, they then during the grand jury process, used my Fifth Amendment right to not appear against me. And when we heard about it, we called them out on it to the judge. The judge asked the prosecutor's office, were you doing this? They emphatically denied it. 3 months later, they had to admit to the court they had lied, and in fact, they had used my Fifth Amendment against me 11 times on 11 different occasions. And yet the case continues to move forward. And finally, just a couple weeks ago, we found out that the same U.S. Attorney's Office was engaged in ex parte communication with the judge in my case about another criminal matter, and that's why we've now got a new judge.
Do you think you were charged 2 days after Donald Trump was elected? Do you think that's a coincidence?
No. I believe this, look, this U.S. attorney, we know, contacted members of Congress advocating for help becoming the next U.S. attorney because, again, he was the guy who was prosecuting Aaron Schock. We know that he was a finalist as one of the finalists for this
case,
White House.
I've got about 15 seconds. The case, you now have paperwork with the Supreme Court. What are the possibilities there?
Well, we hope the Supreme Court accepts our hearing because there's important constitutional concerns about allowing the Justice Department to reinterpret the House rules, which are the fiefdom of the House.
Thank you very much for being here and explaining a lot more to this case.